Hello and welcome to World Insight on CCTV News. I'm Wang Mengmang in Beijing. Coming up on today's program, a new wave of terror. We look at the latest in Brussels following twin bomb attacks on its airport and metro systems, which has ignited fresh fears across the European continent. And promising partnerships. Leaders from China and 5 Southeast Asian countries in the Mekong River region meet in Sanya to explore new avenues of cooperation. While we start today's show in Brussels, where the Belgium's federal prosecutor has confirmed that 2 brothers carried out the suicide bombings on Tuesday, which has killed at least 31 and wounded more than 270. Authorities have confirmed the 2 suspects' identities, but police are still hunting for the 3rd suspect involved in the Brussels airport attacks, believed to be alive and on the run. The Islamic State jihadist group has claimed responsibility for the attacks. Meanwhile, Belgian and EU leaders have held a minute of silence for the victims in the city center, and Belgium has declared 3 days of mourning. Well, London, Madrid, Paris, and now Brussels. Europe's fight against terrorism is set to continue for some time, probably a long time. As world leaders express their condolences and outrage, they're also fully aware that there is no quick and easy solution to defeat the terrorists of today, especially the extremists that make up the Islamic State.
A dark day for Belgium. Hundreds of people crowded into Place de la Bourse late into the night, lighting candles and placing flowers on the ground, and a vigil for the victims of the attacks.
It's a sad day for us. Brussels is a fantastic place, and I don't want anyone to destroy this beauty that we live with here.
On Tuesday, twin blasts struck the main terminal of Brussels International Airport. Shortly after the airport explosions, another blast was reported at metro station in the city center, close to European Union institutions.
What happened yesterday was really horrible. As a citizen of Brussels, it really hurts to experience something like this.
The blasts in Brussels have triggered a wave of security alerts across Europe. German authorities have stepped up security measures at airports, train stations, and borders. The UK official terrorist threat level remains unchanged at severe, a second highest level on a 5-point scale, meaning an attack is highly likely. In France, President François Hollande ordered an additional 1,600 police and paramilitary officers onto the streets of Paris.
Terrorism hits Belgium, but Europe was targeted, and the whole world is concerned. We need to realize the extent and gravity of this terrorist threat.
The deadly explosions in Brussels are just the latest in a series of terror attacks on European soil in recent years. March 13, 2016, 37 people died in a suicide bomb attack in central Ankara, Turkey's capital. The Kurdistan Freedom Hawks militant group claims responsibility. November 13, 2015, 130 people were killed and hundreds wounded in a series of attacks by gunmen and suicide bombers at cafes, a rock concert, and a stadium in Paris. The Islamic State claims responsibility. Terrorists from outside and extremists from the inside are taking concerted actions to instigate instability. The EU has gone a long way in integration, but security still remains the weak link, leaving a modernized EU vulnerable in face of terror.
And now let's get the latest on the developments on the Brussels attack, and we turn to our reporter on the ground, Ollie Barrett. He's live with us from Brussels. Well, Ollie, police have identified the suicide bombers behind the 2 explosions and are now hunting another suspect still on the run. Tell us more about the investigation.
That's right. We've had unfolding raids across Belgium, but particularly here in Brussels in the hours following the attacks here in the Belgian capital. Much of the attention today has been focused on the region of Anderlecht in the city of Brussels, and it was reported earlier by Belgian media that the man in the white coat and the dark hat that was identified as a key suspect in the Brussels attacks, that he had been identified as Najim Lashraoui, and that he had been arrested in those raids in Anderlecht. Well, a little after an hour after that reporting came out of the Belgian media, we heard from the prosecutor here in Brussels, and he said that actually this key suspect seen at the airport in Brussels on CCTV before the bombings were carried out there, that he hadn't yet been identified, was still on the run. What we did hear from the prosecutor was that those two brothers have been identified as suicide bombers in the attack at the airport in Brussels, but also here at the Malbec metro station directly behind me. Khalid El Bakri, the suicide bomber who attacked the metro here in the centre of Brussels, and his brother Brahim, thought to be behind the suicide bomb in a suitcase at the airport. And so clearly investigations are ongoing, because that means there are at least one, possibly two, possibly more suspects involved in these plots who are still on the loose. Belgian police now trying to track them down and detain them.
While the investigation and manhunt continue, ISIL warns that more attacks will follow, and Belgium is now on its highest security alert. So naturally, people are panicking. How are Belgians reacting to the threat?
Well, certainly Belgium is a city that is on edge. It is quieter than it would normally be. Some people have decided to stay away from work for another day. That said, many people are getting on with their lives now. Now, while Malbec Metro behind me remains closed, while investigations continue into the explosion that took place there, many metros and train stations have reopened. There is extra security in place. There is a very visible police presence on the streets of the Belgian capital. Much of it is an armed police presence. Now, some of that will go to reassure Belgians that they are safe because the armed police presence is on the streets. Much of it will go to potentially make them feel anxious that they are needed to be there. But certainly Belgians have known for some time that they are potentially at risk of a terror attack. That terror attack has now happened, and they know full well that there could be further attacks to come.
Well, Ali Barrett reporting from Brussels. Thank you so much for bringing us that. And now to get our discussion on Europe's anti-terror challenges, we're joined in the studio by Mr. Wang Yiwei. He's Director of Center for EU Studies at Renmin University. Welcome. And in Berlin, we have Mr. Henning Rieck. He is head of the Transatlantic Relations Program at the German Council for Foreign Relations. Welcome to you, Mr. Rieck, to World Insight. Now, let's begin with you, Mr. Wang.
Hello.
We understand that Brussels is a very sensitive target, as it's home to the European Union, NATO, as well as other international agencies. So what message is ISIL trying to send by launching attacks there on such a big scale?
First of all, I work in Brussels 3 years, from 2008 to 2011. I traveled, the metro station, the Malbec, and also arrived in the airport many times. My colleagues still working in Brussels. So I really condemn, President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Keqiang telephoned the Belgian leaders of this terror attack. To answer your question, why I selected Brussels? Of course, because it's the headquarters of the European Union and NATO. Particularly, the terrorists want to send signals that the European Union should change the policy about the migration, refugee crisis, and also the policies towards Syria and in general of the Middle East.
Right, and now let's get insights from Mr. Rieck in Berlin. Why do you think Brussels was the target of this round of attacks?
I think it is, one reason is that these networks emanate from Belgium, so it has been close to home. But it is also the attempt to hit the Western world in its heart, so to speak. The most important nod for traffic and people traveling to Europe is the Belgian airport, the Brussels airport, and of course the road to the EU, where many people who are active in international politics live. So this is a very international spot to hit.
Right. Actually, ISIL feeds on fears, and now there are speculations about what triggered the attacks in Brussels. Some say that this is a revenge because police have arrested Salah Abdeslam, who was behind the Paris attacks back in November. But others say that the earlier police disbanding of a terrorist cell in Brussels was actually a catalyst. So do you think these are pre-planned attacks, or are they revenge, Mr. Wang?
Well, terrorist attack in the airport is should be prepared for a long time. It's not so easy. So I'm very astonished for this attack. Of course, it's a revenge to the just declared I think the criminal who caused the Paris terrorist attack was just accomplished, and also the Belgian policeman I think attacked the colleagues of the terrorist. So it's, of course, it's a revenge that they're very angry about Europeans' policy. Refugees, they want to save their, the Muslims. This particularly, I think, they will send a signal to them.
Well, actually, Belgium has been exposed to this great deal of danger. It's been dealing with Islamist extremist groups for years, and hundreds of its own citizens have been lured into fighting for IS in Syria and Iraq. So, Mr. Rika, let me ask you this. What's gone wrong in Belgium, and what's the cause for so many Belgians traveling to Iraq and Syria fighting under the IS flag?
There are like spots where like ghettos and communities of Arab migrants live in Belgium, where there is a hotbed for radicalization and recruitment. But it's, I think, dangerous to look only at Belgium as being the most vulnerable country of Europe. I think the problems that we see exacerbated in Belgium are visible elsewhere in Europe as well. We have migrant communities that might offer a backdrop for that sort of networks, the kind of solidarity network that without doubt exists. We have underprivileged situations for many of these people, so they are more open for recruitment, but also like difficulties for the police community and the agencies to cooperate in this regard. Belgium might be a specific problem because the government has for a long time been very inefficient. There is a strong, very hostile federalism in Belgium, so this might have played a role. Why the police wasn't equipped well enough and didn't pour in enough effort to win over the communities and to infiltrate, to look into the Muslim communities. Other countries might do this better. But the problem is a European one, or one for all industrialized countries, so to speak, where these communities exist, where this sort of background exists. You need to find ways to separate the extremists from the other Muslims that simply want to be normal citizens.
Well, Mr.
So it's very
Rika
important
says
to win
that
over
Europe has
the
a
Muslims in the
collective
confrontation with the extremists.
Mr. Rika says Europe shares a collective identity in the fight against terrorism. Mr. Wang,
Sorry?
do you think this is a case-specific thing, depending on the situation in different countries, or is Europe in the fight against terror together?
Of course, should fight against together. It's not just happened because of the Belgian local problems. I think in general, it's the European Union problem. For a long time after the Second World War, at the end of the Second World War, the Europeans much rely on the NATO's, Americans, military security capacity to protect them. So European Union more focused on the commercial, civilian, building up the capacity. Now there fails so many terror attacks. This is, I think, the capacity, lack of the such kind of capacity, including politically, for the information intelligence, cannot avoid from this happening. Secondly, the system also has some problems. European Union more focused on there is not coherent of the among the 28 countries. Particularly, they have the freedom of movement of the labels, capital and the personals. So it's very difficult to handle this situation because European Union is not a sovereign state. And mentality for a long time also is a big problem. The European Union, I think, too much outsourcing of this capacity to the United States and the UK, who has a long experience to fight against the terrorists. European Union, for a long time, live in a peace period. So this is a alert of they should enhance of the anti-terror capacity and the system mentality.
So there's a great deal of sense of regional integration in Europe. However, when it comes to intelligence sharing, are European countries doing enough to exchange information, Mr. Rika?
I think this is a weak spot of European security cooperation. We have agreed to drop the borders, to create the Schengen space where people can move freely, but we never came up with a proper effective system of cooperation of the law enforcement communities and the intelligence services. So when you look back at 9/11, this is like 15 years ago nearly, and the engagement of the European Union in bringing together the intelligence that we need is far from being perfect. First of all, a couple of countries are federal, as in Germany, so the first task is to bring the agencies inside the countries to really cooperate. This has been a tremendous task. There are 38 agencies somewhat looking into the prosecution of terrorism in Germany alone, but this is no excuse. I mean, if you look at the fact that now we have at Europol a center where information is shared among the allied intelligence services, where liaison officers are, and only 5 countries regularly contribute to that database. So it's impossible to know that. The Paris attacker has crossed the border between Belgium and France twice, 3 times without being noticed. So this cannot be. This has to be improved.
So, Mr. Rika mentioned about institutional problems. What are your views on this, Mr. Wang? What do you see as the major factors hampering European countries from sharing intelligence?
Well, of course, this is highly pressed. The European Union should tighten of these cooperations. Otherwise, cannot prevent from other occasions of happening. I think, but most importantly, it's not a technician question. It's the European Union should change the policy. Particularly, they should cooperate with the United States, with Russia also, and change the policy in Syria to because terrorists they hate the European Union's policy because they treat the refugees unfairly, and the European countries, many of them, they are Muslimized. So the local citizens, they also feel sympathy to the refugees, to the migrants. So this policy cannot change, and in the long term cannot, to solve this problem.
But what if there are more attacks to follow? Will this refugee crisis in Europe be shattered once and for all?
Of course, this is the shadow of this policy. For instance, the United Kingdom, want to have the vote in June, want to quit the European Union. This is make the European citizens, the European Union feels more, troubles, terrorist attack. So this is, of course, it's not good for the result. But at the same time, all the European integrations, because of the crisis, this is another terror attack crisis, hopefully will put forward of the integration of the Europeans' common security and the policy coherence.
Mm-hmm. And now there are sharp divisions over Europe's policy on the refugee crisis. Countries like Germany are now still passionately defending its open-door policy, while opponents actually attribute these attacks to the influx of refugees. So, Mr. Rika, what do you think exactly is happening? What's the core cause? What's the root cause of the problem?
I believe it's important to understand that Germany doesn't have a liberal open-door policies to all refugees. It's important to say that. It has been a reaction by the Chancellor to an upcoming wave of migrants who were like out in the cold, so to speak, to act from a point of charity and let them in. But it was a very severe challenge and task that was been taken very seriously to gain or regain control over that flow, to know who comes in, to redistribute the refugees, to keep them from going into Germany in the first place. So there have been a lot of measures, a package inside the European Union that has been negotiated in the past years, or in the past months. The most recent achievement, the agreement with Turkey. You can criticize that, of course, but it kept the flow at bay of refugees that came into Germany. And I think it's very important not to equalize the refugees with extremists and terrorists. So this is a very important point. The danger is actually that we have Salafist extremists here, and many of the refugees are like single young men traveling, and they might be like victim of this kind of recruitment. So we have to take care that they are integrated into our society, and we have to treat them with respect. Otherwise, they might fall into the hands of the extremists.
And talking about the ongoing investigation, we know that another looming question facing the investigators is the depth of connections between the attacks on Brussels and the ones on Paris. And the more investigators dig, it seems that the links become more obvious. So how difficult will it be for them to deal with a highly organized and well-trained network, Mr. Wang?
Well, I think European Union should cooperate more with NATO and with other major powers like the United States and Russia. I think China also, because for this terrorist attack, I think, prepared for a long time. To solve this problem, to increase the capacity of the European Union's anti-terror is a long way to go. Most important, I think, is for the intelligence sharing to identify, as I know that the United States gave some intelligence to the Germany. That's the reason that Germany avoid some terrorist attack. So this cooperation is very important.
Well, a famous anti-terrorism expert, Clint Watts, wrote about the iceberg theory of the terror plots. He says that for every attacker, there's usually a team of people supporting his plots to carry out the plan. So how soon will the next attack be, and what are the terrorists up to next? Mr. Rieke?
I think it is very dangerous yes, I think it is a very dangerous development that there is obviously a network of people who are willing to sacrifice themselves in these terrorist attacks, who are willing to apply utmost violence, but there is also like a broad network of supporters. I mean, the fact that the Paris assassin has lived in his own neighborhood for 4 months, obviously, is a sign that there are many people actually feeling solidarity with him, and this is a huge problem. This is why it's so important to better infiltrate these communities, or to better understand these communities, to have like more experts who are able to speak languages, to reach out to these people and to isolate the extremists, to figure out who is actually a dangerous killer and who is only a supporter who might or might not be part of the danger in the end. It's very difficult, but you need more resources for that, more money, more exchange, of course, but also more people who know languages, who know the culture, who are themselves seen as seriously. The problem is that many of the extremists, they don't see the regular community leaders as elders, as people with a certain charisma. They think they are part of the depraved Western society. So it's very difficult to reach the die-hard killers, but it might be more easy to infiltrate the network of solidarity around them.
Well, it seems that Europe and the world at large has a long way to go in the fight against terrorism. We'd like to thank our panel, Mr. Wang Yue in Beijing and Mr. Henning Rieke over in Berlin. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your insights. And now stay with us here on World Insight. We've got our final segment coming up. Breaking new ground. Leaders from China and 5 Southeast Asian countries in the Mekong River region meet in Sanya to explore new avenues of cooperation. Stay with us for that. Welcome back to World Insight. The first Lancang-Mekong Cooperation, or LMC, leaders meeting has kicked off in Sanya in China's Hainan province. Running with the theme of shared river, shared future, leaders will be discussing future cooperation. The LMC, proposed in 2014, will focus on security and development, as well as political, social, and cultural fields. In the past years, the mechanism has benefited people along the rivers, and in the future, more initiatives will be launched to boost the development of the Lancang-Mekong region. And before we go to our panel discussion, let's have a look at this report.
Promising partnerships. Leaders from 6 countries along the Lancang-Mekong River have convened in the southern Chinese city of Sanya to discuss new opportunities for cooperation. The theme for the first Lancang-Mekong Cooperation Leaders Meeting is Shared River, Shared Future. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang, along with leaders from Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, are attending the event.
If the countries along the Lancang-Mekong River can improve mutual political trust, enhance mutual economic complementation, and push forward human exchanges, we can make this region an important force of regional stability and a powerful force of world peace. And we can make ourselves the ones with the most potential for development among Asian developing countries.
Lancang and Mekong are the names for the same river. The source of the Mekong is in China's Tanggulan Mountains in the northwest. The river runs through Yunnan province and it flows to Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. The Mekong River supplies water to an area of 795,000 square kilometers. 326 million people live in this region. The average annual economic growth is about 7%, making it one of the most promising regions in Asia and the world. However, the economic development of the Mekong subregions started late and currently falls behind compared to neighboring regions. The Lancang-Mekong Cooperation, or LMC, stands for this region's cooperation in infrastructure construction.
The construction and the upgrade of infrastructure will help enhance the interaction of the nations along the river. It will reduce the cost of transportation.
China proposed the establishment of the mechanism in 2014. A year after that, the first foreign ministers meeting among these 6 countries highlighted security, economy and sustainable development, and culture as the LMC's 3 pillars. Currently, the 5 priority directions for the LMC are interconnectivity, production capacity, cross-border economy, water resources, agriculture, and poverty alleviation. Joint patrol enforcement in the Mekong has already been conducted 43 times. Several regional expressways are under the construction. More regional airlines are on the way. All in all, there are high hopes that LMC will inject a great deal of vitality into the Mekong River region.
And now to get more discussion, let me introduce our panel here. We have in the Beijing studio Mr. Teng Jianjun. He's director for the Center of Arms Control at the China Institute of International Studies, and Mr. Song Qingrun from the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. And over in Bangkok, we're joined by Mr. Sean Buprikon. He's former advisor to the Thai government. Welcome, gentlemen, to all of you to World Insight. So, the Mekong River is said to be the heart and soul of Southeast Asia, with abundant resources as well as very promising economic prospects. In what areas specifically do you think that the countries along the river can further enhance their cooperation? Mr. Tang.
Some mechanisms have already been there. For example, the cooperation among the countries, between the countries. This is a very important initiative proposed by the Chinese leaders and also the regional countries this time. And the new phrase, Lancang and the Mekong River Cooperation, actually gave a new driving force. For example, as our Premier today addressed, that the first and the most important thing is stability in this region, so we can enjoy the development. This is the second part of our Premier addressed today. And also the inclusiveness to include all the parties concerned for the development and for the cooperation in this area.
And of course, rivers along this river share many similar challenges in terms of natural disasters and terrorism, and they also share some similar development goals and interests. So, do you think that this new cooperation mechanism, Mr. Song, is more aimed at economic integration or political solidarity?
I think maybe both, because this mechanism is a comprehensive cooperation mechanism. In the economic field, just as Mr. Tong said, this mechanism will promote the economic cooperation for the 6 member countries and this region a lot, and it will promote this region's common growth in the future. Second, I think also this region, under this mechanism, the 6 countries in the future will facilitate their political dialogues and to promote the mutual visits and exchanges between the government officials, parliament members, and party members in the future. Also to promote the exchanges among the scholars among these countries. So in the future, the political mutual trust in this region among these 6 countries will be strengthened in the future, and this will facilitate the future comprehensive cooperation among these 6 countries.
And now we'd like to get some Thai perspective. Let's turn to Mr. Bumprakawn in Bangkok. So what do you think are the priorities in terms of cooperation between and among countries along the Mekong River?
Well, of these 2 gentlemen previously mentioned a state share goal for the region, but I'd like to add that we have really addressed this issue a little bit late compared to other parts of the world. As you can see, the global warming has now become fairly had created incredible high degree of temperature in the summer, and we are facing drought in this region, and therefore it's a must that this water must be distributed fairly, and especially with the largest part of the water being kept in China. And I think that's a sensitive matter with Chinese government. Want to make sure that other government have some understanding how this could be distributed in a way that we could see some equality in all, and that's a huge challenge for us all.
Besides the management of water resources, what else do you see as very important cooperation areas between countries along the river?
Well, we are all involved in the region politically, economically, socially. So we can't exclude all that. There has been an exchange, has been people-to-people exchange across the border. So many Chinese come to Thailand and the rest of Southeast Asia. We are the golden land. We export more food to the world than most. Therefore, we cannot afford not to pay really careful attention to our natural resources, as economic development are degrading our ability to sustain it. So of course, there's no question that is the most important, and I'm glad that the Chinese government involved in being a part of this totally.
And interestingly, gentlemen, almost all the countries under this new mechanism belong to the ASEAN bloc, to which China has developed very close ties. There's now an increasing sense of interdependence as well as connectivity between these countries. So will this mechanism, the LMC, act as a supplement to relations between China and ASEAN? Mr. Teng.
Of course, it's a very important arrangement among the countries concerned in this region because, of the geographic, advantage among the countries in that region. And we paid several visits to these countries last year, and we were deeply impressed by the, feeling, the hospitality from the local people. They are very, kind of our visit, and also gave us a lot of proposals for the enhancement of the cooperation in politics, in security, and also in economy. And as compared with other 5, countries of ASEAN, these 5 countries, just to show their specific interest in the cooperation. For example, the people's exchanges, they gave very, higher, anticipation to the cooperation in this regard. For example, the overseas Chinese to study Beijing in some other countries, they can get some benefit from the achievements of our, fast development. China, after more than 30 years of fast development, actually has become the driving engine of world economy. So I think there are a lot of complementarities between China and the 5 countries. They can make a full use of the advantages from each other and to have win-win cooperation in this regard.
And of course, geographical proximity is a very important thing to facilitate sub-regional development. But when it comes to there are different political agendas, Mr. Song. How do you think that different political agendas will hamper the progress on the sub-regional cooperation?
I think there is a common feeling or common sense that this region, these 6 countries, should to unite or to cooperate with each other to facilitate this region development. Because currently, as our premier said, the world economic situation is not good, and its growth is slow. So now, even there are some differences among the 6 countries' political agendas or their priorities in some areas for cooperation. But I think under this common sense our cooperation, so I think in the future we can think about more and more specific areas to cooperate under this mechanism. We can implement the specific plans of early harvest in the future to create direct effects of this mechanism to show that this mechanism is a very dynamic.
While expectations are high on this new mechanism, there are criticisms. For example, there are voices saying that China is trying to exert its influence and control over the Mekong River region as Beijing launches this diplomatic campaign with 5 countries downstream. So, Mr. Bimperkon, what are your views on this? How would you respond to this criticism? Is it a fair criticism?
Well, it's out there, and because we are neighbors, there has been a new standard of international relationship where there is both a private diplomacy and there is a public diplomacy through media, and we have to make sure that we engage in both, and we have to, our leaders, our media people have to put some grievances and address that grievances in a way, not in a sensational manners. And I believe that since our relationship with the region, with China economic growth for the past 20 years, and Southeast Asian, especially 5 countries, are the same way. So we will have to address it. And yes, there are that accusation, but as it goes along, we both will address it, and I believe that we have to live together. There has to be some give and take, and I believe that China has taken it a little bit unfairly in a way that the water has to come down, so the water can't go anywhere, and maybe the criticism have to be understood by a little bit more emotional, but as a government to government, we always should maintain this communication and address it in a fair way. I think that we are headed in that direction fairly.
Well, Mr. Tong, what do you think are the roles that China is going to play in this under this LMC mechanism?
Actually, we heard a lot of complaint from the United States, from Japan about the increase of our influence in this region. For example, the cooperation with the 5 countries about the the security and economic arrangement. They said you are going to do something in this region and to have some sphere of influence in this region. But I think this is only one side of the coin. Of course, China has adjusted its policy toward the 5 countries in recent years as one part of our comprehensive diplomacy. We not only put the importance to the major power relationship, but also we try our best to have a good neighboring countries relationship. This is one part of our foreign diplomacy. So I think ASEAN countries and also the 5 countries along the Mekong River is very important part of our diplomacy. So we will, give some support for the infrastructure development and also to share the achievements we, have got in the past decades. And of course, this is a win-win cooperation, as I mentioned just now. We will give some assistance and share the, the cooperation with any country, who are willing to have such a cooperation.
And now, Mr. Song, what do you think will be the major benefits for people in these countries under this LMC mechanism?
Yeah. One of our very important aims of this mechanism or goals is that to promote the people's well-being in this region. First, I think the anti-poverty project in the future under this mechanism will eliminate the poverty for many people in this region. And many people will become rich and enjoy a very comfortable life. Second, I think this mechanism will facilitate the people-to-people exchange in this region, especially along the border areas. So, and also to provide more opportunities for the foreign students among these countries to study in other countries. Third, I think if we can roll out the poverty problem in this region, this will decrease the instability phenomena in this region, to decrease the crime rate in this region, and to make sure that the people in this region can enjoy a very safe life in this region.
Now, this is only the beginning of this LMC mechanism, and more specifics will be rolled out in the future, and we'll certainly keep watching how it's going to benefit the people in these countries. We'd like to thank our panel here, Mr. Teng Jianqun, Mr. Song Jingrun, and also over in Bangkok, Mr. Sean Bunperkon. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your insight on this. And that's all the time we have for this edition of World Insight. If you'd like to see more, you can visit our website. Just type World Insight CCTV News into a search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. For me, Wang Mengmang, and everyone here at the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again next time for more insights from around China and the world.